So at least we'll have a recording if they come in late. Yeah, well, let's start and they can go to the recording for the first 5 minutes if they come in late. I hate to delay things because you guys make a real effort to get here on time, and I like to reward that. So one thing I haven't talked too much about in this class is soft skills and work skills, work-related skills. And obviously the construction content, I mean, we're not practicing that in the labs here, but you're still seeing it, is part of it. But also there's other skills, as you know. Soft skills are, in this case, are skills to apply for jobs and how to act on jobs. So, but one of the skills that's really important is being somewhere on time. And you guys, this crowd is the on-time crowd. And in this class, I don't take it too negatively because it's a night class. A lot of you, most of you work. You really bust ass to get here as it is. So I don't care if you're a little late. That's part of the reality. But just in general, it's really good if you're one of those people that tends to be late. Sometimes it's a habit or a state of mind, and that's hard to break, but you really need to break that. Because in any kind of employment, that's one of the things they judge you on. You know, if they're looking for things to get rid of you, they'll look at the time things. Does he come back from breaks on time? Does he get here on time? Is he willing to stay later? You know, so those are all important things. Most of you already know this stuff because most of you are working and have jobs and have been hired. So this is just for the people that are starting out in this career track. Okay, so I guess I'll just go over the topics. Sometimes I'll even ask the question if it's a hard one to explain topic-wise. I'll just give you that answer. So, but I couldn't put the test on the Canvas screen because then you'd see the test, and then the recording you could just have the recording on with the answers when you do the test. That wouldn't quite be a test. So I'm going to read these to you. So you're going to have to listen to me, but please ask questions, and I'm sure you will. So the first part of the test, I'm going to ask some questions on the conventions of blueprints. Remember, there's international conventions. And I'll probably ask you to, I'll probably put 4 types of plans like structural, architectural, civil. Remember that in your first handout? I'll probably put those and I'll ask you to put a number and order those. So the first one is civil. And so I'll have others after that, or that'll be in the mix. And you have to put, you know, you have to look at, I mean, you could always look at a set of plans and see what order they have. Although, what's the problem with that?
Different architects do it differently.
Yeah, the people think, especially architects, you know, they're already in a creative profession. So they like to think creatively. So they stretch the conventions, unfortunately, because, I mean, they never deviate too far, but they should be really more exact because, you know, we have to follow those plans. And if they're not well ordered, it makes it hard for us. Okay, so that'll be one question. Then does anybody remember or know what the biggest category of plan was that we've covered so far? And we've covered the biggest one, so it's altogether the biggest category. Like, is it the civic plans or is it the structural plans? Which one has the most subsets in it? Anybody know? We haven't talked about that exactly. You could guess from what we've been looking at. Okay, so it's architectural plans. So can somebody list 3 types of architectural plans? There's more, there's 6 or 8.
Maybe
You guys are forcing me to drink more coffee. I want you to know that.
maybe a floor plan.
Floor plan, yep.
Site
You might
plan,
as well name
site plan?
site plan. It's who said that? Marcos.
Is that not architectural?
Yeah, site plan's a civic plan.
Uh,
Yeah. Now, believe it or not, I think even some of the sets we have, they include site plan as an architectural plan. And that's the thing. And it's not really the end of the world, how you know, except if you go to a set of plans and you want to find something, you're in a hurry, you'll see a big A for architectural plans and a little box at the bottom, A3, A2, and you'll also see a C for civil. So it just helps you find something if they stay with the letters of the types of plan. So floor plan, what else?
From my background, landscape.
Ooh, so
Yeah.
landscape.
Because there's a landscape architect that
Yeah, so
hates them.
that's a great point, and we haven't distinguished those, and I think they're different. I think landscapes are all one category. They don't have architectural and site and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I'll-
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's grading, there's some grading into it, but more, it's
Yeah,
more.
the grading is considered a site plan category. So I'd say a lot of landscaping's in site plan. But
Yeah,
But you know, landscapers that just do a landscape plan for a house or community, those wouldn't probably have the same category designations, you know,
right, yeah.
because they're all landscape. So that's a good point, though. Landscaping does have a set of blueprints, so.
what about
I've got-
elevations?
Pardon?
What are elevations? What do they fall under?
Those are architectural also. As are sections, as are details.
D2?
Patrick, would a door schedule?
Yes,
Uh,
schedules. Yeah, Alex, schedules are also architecture. We haven't covered it yet, so I won't ask anything on the test, on the midterm for that, but they are in fact architectural. See, there's a whole bunch. And if hey, Johnny. How you doing? And if,
Good.
okay, great. So we're doing so everybody that's come in new, we're starting on the midterm prep, and we're only in the second question, so. And if you want to know the first question, you can look at the recording, but so anyway, roof plan is also one, but not all plans have roof plans, so that would depend.
Hey,
Okay.
Patrick.
Yes, sir.
Lindsay,
Yes, ma'am.
This is Lindsay. I'm back. Would you mind multi-pinning me again? I'm sorry, my whole
Oh, no,
internet.
no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime. You guys just interrupt. I'm fine with that. Okay, then I'll ask a question of, this will be the question, so it doesn't have an exact answer, so you have to think about it. Why are there worldwide uniform conventions for plans? And if you wonder what those conventions are, your first handout had those.
Well, it's so that it's universal, right, across the board?
Well, don't answer it, Marcos.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part.
It's okay. It's okay. So, no, that's a good point, though. Some of these questions, especially the ones that require you to think, you're going to think on your own anyway, so it's not one answer.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So
Could you
when I
repeat
ask that,
question?
don't answer them.
Could you repeat the question, please, Patrick?
Yes, I will. Why are there worldwide uniform conventions for plans, for blueprints? I mean, if you just think about it, it's pretty obvious, but it's also in that first handout. Now, Johnny, you had a little difficulty entering the class at first, is that right?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay, so you have all the handouts.
Yeah, I have everything.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Are
So
all the
if some of you came in later, there were a few of you that had trouble entering the class. Let me know if you don't have the handouts and the plans, because that's pretty critical for that. So this midterm is open, handout, you know, the set 1, 2, 3, 4 through 8, and it's open blueprint. So when you're taking the test, you can consult any of those for answers or
But
help.
the handouts you emailed to us, right, in the beginning?
Yes,
Yeah,
again, I did. And all the handouts I mailed to you are now under the, thanks to John's request are under in the file in Canvas.
Oh, okay,
Everything
sweet.
we passed out is in the file, the handouts and the blueprints. So that makes it real easy to get to.
What is
Sometimes-
handout? What is the first handout labeled?
That one,
Set 1?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then it just goes from there, yeah. So, okay, so here's a great idea. So, when we take this test, there's going to be a spread from A's to C's. I never give less than a C. The difference will be test taking skills. I've had master carpenters get B's and C's on tests just because they weren't good at tests. They obviously knew all the stuff cold. And that's an unfortunate part of our system. There's no, you know, there's nothing to test taking skills. Some people get it better than others. It's really not fair to judge people that way intellectually, but that's what we do. So if I think of a skill along the way, I'll just shout it out so you may be able to use that. One of the things for this exam coming up is using the handouts and the blueprints. If you have a question, just go there and that'll have most of the answers probably. The other thing is, what was I going to say? Now I forgot. Oh yeah, no. I'll think of it in a second. Oh yeah. You might, before the exam, go to your file section in your Canvas shell and look, just open up each one to see what it is. So it's fresh in your memory. So if you have to go to it during the test, you'll know, oh, that's in one of the middle sets, maybe set 3, and you can go there. Just help you speed it along. You got plenty of time for the test, but my tests give a lot of time. They give the whole class time and longer if people need it. But many tests are really tight. The time's tight. You know, most classes are an hour. Sometimes tests are 50 minutes. And timing is a huge thing. To be able to get to information and get it down quick. So that's another test taking skill, is before the test, making sure all your resources are in your mind, or if it's an open book or note test, they're in front of you so you can get to them. So access to information is really important test taking skill for speed. Okay. I might ask you, take a certain plan and ask you what general category it is. Like I might say what the elevation is and then I'll have structural, civil, architectural, and you just circle the one it is. Yeah? Yeah. That'll be easy because we've just gone over a lot of it. So, and that first handout talks about all that stuff. Now, another thing that I think is important is expressing what scale is, the concept of scale. So if you say 1/4 inch equals 1 foot dash 0 inches, and technically the convention is to write it as a fraction on one side, a fraction of an inch, quarter, half, eighth, equals, and it's always the same on the right side. It's always 1 foot dash 0 inches. And that makes it clear that it's not anything but an even foot. There's not any extra inches on that side. It's a convention. Kind of everybody understands that, but so if it's a convention, you need to write it like the convention and don't get sloppy or shorthanded. Some things you need to do just like it's like following orders. Some orders are trivial, follow them. Some orders are ethically questionable. Think before you follow them. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. So 1/4 inch equals 1 foot 0. And you all know what the feet and inch marks are. You know, the 1 apostrophe is a foot and the 2 quote, the quote one is an inch. Everybody knows that?
Yes.
Most people at this stage in their life know it, but you know, you never know. Okay. Then I'm going to ask you what that scale equation means. So I'll talk about it a little bit. You're scaling something. So you're saying something big out there is being drawn at a smaller proportion. So you're establishing what the relationship between the blueprint or the drawing and the real building or whatever it is your drawing is of, right?
Right.
So the inch side is what's on your paper, and the equals foot 0 is put, so this is giving it away, but that's okay. Put, for the right side, put real world or the structure itself, something that points to that building that you're looking at the plans of, right? So the left side's about your blueprints, the right side's about the big world out there, the macro world that the blueprints refer to. So it's I know you know that intuitively because we've been working with it, but I want you to be able to articulate it that way. Everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay. Then I may ask you what scale are various plans. I'll only have one, but I'm not going to tell you what plan it is. The site plot plan is the only one that's a little bit ambiguous because they use different types of scales for it. They'll use a regular architect scale, and that would be usually like 1/8 of an inch. But they'll also use sometimes an engineering scale. So I probably won't ask that one. The rest are pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, we've gone over section drawings, right?
Yes.
And so you know that they're a cut from the roof down to the floor or the foundation. It's like you take a knife and you cut a cake. You cut right down through that building. And the reason you're cutting is because you want to show something that you can't see. You can't see the inside of the building on any plan except the floor plan. The elevation just shows you the outside, so you're not seeing inside at all. So if you want to see a straight on view of the inside, you have to use a section to show that. And they're really useful because houses have all kinds of crazy stuff in them that the floor plan doesn't quite show well enough. Okay. Now, I have a question about the breakdown I gave you, saying that floor plans have objects, dimensions, and annotations. Do you remember that at the beginning?
Yes.
Now, that's not everybody uses that breakdown. It's just something I read somewhere in one of the books I was probably using, and I liked it because it's kind of tidy and it also makes you think about what's on the plan. So objects are everything. Bathtubs, like on a floor plan, you'd see a bathtub, you'd see a doorway, cabinets, light, where the light fixture goes. Those are all objects. And then a floor plan also shows dimensions, how distance it is from the door to the window and all that. And then it also has just information about finishes or processes, what you have to do, any kind of verbal information that you can't just show it a symbol. So they'll write in words, this requires blah, 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 or it'll give you the layers of the roof. Make sure you have this on first, then this, then the shingles. And those are called annotations. So you could classify every symbol and line you see on a print as one of those three. Okay, I don't know how much we discussed this. This isn't critical for here because we don't build with brick a lot, brick walls. Occasionally, usually it's brick veneer, but I think this also goes for brick veneer too, what I'm going to say. And that is with a non-brick building, we talked about this, but I'm repeating it. In a non-brick building, how you locate windows and doors is by the center line to the door or window over to wherever you want to measure from. The inside of the wall next to it, the outside of the wall next to it. Someplace where a carpenter can look at his frame and go, oh, okay, I'm going to lay out this wall and it's 6 foot from the end to the center of this door. And then right there, that's exactly where the architect wants the door. And then you can go from either side of that to your trimmer and all your door pieces, but you got the center. So it makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of trim with windows and windows of different sizes. So that eliminates all the crap. You just got a center line and you just go the same distance from either side. With brick buildings, the brick can't be moved, when the brick's in. When the brick around a window or a door is in, it's permanent. So that in a brick building, you would measure from whatever you're measuring from the end of the building to the edge of the brick where the door starts or where the window starts. You don't go to the center line. With brick, you go to the edge because it's such a fixed piece of construction. Now, one of the questions is going to use the word site as a verb. So we have a site plan, and site's an adjective. It describes what kind of plan. But you can use site as a verb, meaning to go site the building, to situate. It's short for situate the building on the plan or on the ground. So make sure you're clear that you can use site and it's gerund would be citing, S-I-T-I-N-G. So it's a verb, various verb uses. Just be aware of that. I won't give you the question. It'll be pretty obvious.
Sorry, this is the interpreter, just to clarify. So you're saying on the exam is going to be site like S-I-T-E or site like C-S-I-G-H-T?
No, it'll always be S-I-T-E.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It'll be site plan, which is S-I-T-E, or plot plan, or it'll be how does one site the house on the lot? Same thing, verb with S-I-T-E. That can be confusing, You can confuse it with the verb to see. Okay. Now, scale is another word that's confusing in blueprint reading. We have mainly two uses of it. One is, what's one? You guys tell me. Hey, Duke,
Yep,
who does the artwork above your head?
this is all my kids' handiwork.
That's what I was thinking. That's great. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Kids' work is the best.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so how is scale used? Give me one way we use it in blueprint reading. Anybody?
Obviously, like, when we need to find out how big something is, we use the scale.
Yeah, so it's a relationship between things, right? A scale, something's scaled down from something, that use of the word.
Yep.
Yeah,
To be able to fit like a plan or a house on a piece of paper.
yeah, it's a proportion. Yeah, you guys got that. So it's the proportion of how your scales actually means proportion, I think. But what's another second use? This will be a multiple choice, so you don't have to, it'll be obvious. But the second use would be gets them every time. Done.
Are you talking about a ruler?
Yes. So the other meaning is the architectural scale, the ruler. They don't like to call it a ruler. Never call it a ruler in front of an architect. He'll whap you over the head with it. It's their precious tool, So it's called a scale. So that can be confusing. So we have two meanings for scale.
I didn't realize that. So they call the ruler a scale.
The architectural scale they call a scale. They don't call a regular
Is it
ruler.
scale?
Yeah, the triangular one that Duke's holding up. Yeah. This is called a scale, and it can be an architect's or an engineer. Remember I told you to get the architect scale, but it could be an engineer scale too. On the written test, I have you draw lines and measure lines, but we can't do them on this test. So I had to strike all of those questions. So now I'm going to ask you, and this I want you to remember, I'm going to ask you to name types of information on a certain plan. And what I mean by types of information is dimension, object, or annotation. Sometimes when I use the word types, people get confused because it's a variable word. So if you just remember types of information on a certain plan means one of those three things.
Said dimensions, objects, and annotations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I might ask you what type of information is on a certain plan. And like, if it was an elevation, you would have, in terms of objects, you would have windows, you would have siding, things like that. In terms of dimensions, usually elevations don't have dimensions. So that wouldn't be one, right? And you could look at your plans and say, do elevations have dimensions? And go back and look and realize that they don't. Most dimensions are reserved for the floor plan. That's its purpose. There will be dimensions on an elevation, vertical dimensions, because you can't see those on a floor plan. But those can also be given in details. Sometimes a detail will have a cross section of the whole side of the building, so it'll give you, dimensions there. Yeah. And then elevation drawings I'm giving you this question, are like a photograph of the outside of a building, right? Now, you could say, no, they're not like a photograph because they don't have color and they don't have everything. That's why I decided to clarify it for you, for the picky ones of you that are, it's most like a photograph of any other type of plan. There's a difference in the geometry between your vision and the way we draw buildings. Your vision looks in perspective. And it's not even the same perspective as we do when we draw perspective. So photograph follows your vision, and it's not going to be exactly like a geometrical drawing based on dimensions. It won't be that way. So they're technically not exactly alike. That's another reason I decided to explain it. But they're close enough that we say, yeah, a photograph, elevation's like it's like a photograph. Has the same kinds of information. Yeah, so when I'm going to ask you what kinds of things does an elevation view show you? So just, if you don't know offhand, and probably you should by this time, but if you don't, go to an elevation plan in your stock of class plans, and it'll be really obvious what it has. Now, framing plans, let's talk about those, because we've looked at those, right? Yeah. So, so floor and ceiling plans are framing plans, rather. Forgot to call them framing plans. They usually often don't show wall framing plans unless there's a real unusual type of wall that framers might need help understanding. But they always show floors and ceilings because the joists that run across a floor or a ceiling can run different ways. And so if you didn't have instructions, you might decide for yourself which way they're going to run. And it might not be, well, for one thing, well, the architect couldn't blame you if he didn't have a plan, but it might not be structurally good. So sometimes the ceilings of a floor plans are almost always just one giant set of joists running the same way. They don't usually change. They could have beams holding them up, and they have beams and foundation pads holding them up because sometimes they'll span a long distance, but they try to get them all going the same way. So it's less floor plans than ceiling plans. Ceiling plans, the joists can go this way, and then the next room they'll go this way, looking down at it. And that's because for many reasons, but sometimes to span, you'll have a long, thin room or hallway, and you don't want to put joists 20 feet down the hallway, because one thing, they'll be huge width-wise to span 20 feet. So you want to just go across the hallway with little joists. So a lot of it is how much distance you have to span. And you usually take the shortest distance in a room. Many rooms are kind of squarish, so it won't matter too much. But if you get a rectangle and it starts getting bigger sideways, you want to do the joist across. Why do you want to use shorter joists? Anybody?
Strength,
What?
stronger.
No, not necessarily.
Most likely the flex.
Most likely what?
The flex.
Yeah, flexing could be something. Yeah, strength could be a thing, I guess, but
Material, just like, what about material?
no. Well, what about materials?
Like, it's hard to get super
Yeah,
long.
Yeah, access to material and price of material. The
Easier to
longer a
work
joist is, the more it costs. You can get a 6 foot, that's usually the shortest piece of wood they sell in lumber yards. You can get a 6 foot piece of wood really cheaply, but 20-foot piece costs a lot more. Takes more of a tree. They have to use bigger trees. If you have a 20-foot 2x12, that can't have too many knots in it, rough framing, because the knots weaken it. So there's a specification of the maximum number of knots. And knots come toward the outside of a tree. They're where the branches go off the tree. So if you want wood with less knots, you have to go toward the center of the tree. And you have to go further to the center, the less knots you want. And so if you're getting toward the center of the tree and you've got 12-inch wide wood at 20 feet, you're taking a pretty darn good sized tree to get that. So that takes older growth wood. So, you know, if we can help it, we don't want to use wide, long pieces. They just take more older trees. We want to use younger trees. They're easier to replace. It's an easier forestry maintenance practice. So the other thing about that is the height of the ceiling may change. You know, rooms have different things. Some will be lower heights. They may step up. There's all different things that happen. And therefore, your joist, you know, you want to try to get the top of the joist fairly on the same plane for an attic or a second floor. And if you've got joists of different widths because they have to span longer and shorter things, they're going to shove up into that second floor or attic, and you don't want that. So you've got to make sure your joists are fairly uniform. And if one's wider, you have to make the ceiling lower. If you're going to have a second floor, that floor has to be flat. There's no way you can have one set of joists above a room stick up into that floor. It's not going to work. So a lot of times they'll jockey it around by, you know, if a short hallway joist is going to be lower, they could always put a piece of wood on it, you know, just scab a piece on top of it. They could raise the height of the ceiling so that joist goes up a little bit and matches the floor above. So they've worked that all out, and it's a little puzzle, and you have to follow it because it's designed for a purpose. So what's the question? Oh, so on a ceiling framing plan, they'll show which way the joists go, right? This way or this way. They'll show where the joists stop on one side of a room to the other. You might have 16 on center joists all across the house, but they may be different thicknesses. So you've got to show where the set of 2x8 stops and the set of 2x6s start. So they also show what I used to call the span, but that's not a good word. So let's call it the spread. John, have you heard of another word? The spread, you know, the extent of those joists, the spread, how far they go. Span gets confusing because span can mean the length, you know, how much, you know, they're spanning. I think spread's a good word. So they'll show the spread. Remember that little line that was at a diagonal? And it said on the line, it said 2x12 at 16 on center. But it was along that spread line. If a line is at an angle, it's obviously not a dimension line or a wall line. It'll also show, there's no other plan to show the width of the joist, right? Where else are you going to see the width of the joist that you're using? Actually, one of the set of plans we had a section that showed it showed all the ends of the joist. And so that section actually showed the size of the joist, but that's highly unusual. Most architects don't do a section just to show joist. This guy decided to do it that way so he could avoid having a ceiling framing plan. So if you list those things, those are what are shown on a ceiling framing plan. Yeah. Size of joist, that means the width of them, 2x8, 2x6. It could mean the thickness if for some reason it took thicker joists. Usually they don't get thicker joists, they just put them closer together. Like if you have a bathtub or a big body of weight on a floor, instead of putting beams underneath it, they'll just put them 12 inches on center instead of 16, you know, or 10 inches on center. They'll crowd it up to make it stronger.
Will the plan show you what strapping you need to use?
Yeah.
To
Nowadays, the plans will show you every piece of hardware. Because it's part of the litigation proofness of the plan. Is if there's a failure and the failure is due to the neglect of using the right hardware, then the contractor's at fault. There's so much suing over things that go wrong that the various parties in building a house have all, you know, made sure they're covered. That means plans are way over designed. And in some ways, maybe it's good, but it's a pain in the ass for the builder, for carpenters, because they have to, you know. It kind of makes idiots out of us too, because we no longer have to develop a sense of what works. And we get to rely on information from other people. So anyway. How's everybody doing? Okay.
Good.
Is this a good idea to go over this like this?
Yep.
I mean, we talk about it, you ask questions, so we're relearning it. So it's just another way to learn the stuff. So floor framing plan, some of the same kinds of things information are given. Another thing on a floor framing plan, what else is unique to a floor framing plan? And the hint is that it comes on top of a foundation. What might be on a floor framing plan that's not on a ceiling framing plan?
Footings?
Yeah, any support of joist from the foundation. So it could be footings or foundation walls. It could be, you know, the in between pads with posts. And it could be beams, girders. A lot of times, really typical is they'll want to span a whole basement or crawl space or first floor, and it's too long. Say it's 30 feet long. It's too long. You can't get a 30-foot piece of wood. So they'll put a beam right in the middle in the foundation. It'll have a pocket on the side wall, and you'll put that beam, and then you'll take the joist halfway. You'll get 15 footers going each half. So, and that will show on the floor framing plan. And if you look at our plans, you'll see that. It'll show where the beams go, underneath go. Plan view, the word plan always means from above. You notice they don't call elevations elevation plans. They'll just say an elevation print. They will say floor plan, roof plan, floor framing plan, because all those are looking from above. Okay, direction of the slope of a roof from a roof on a roof plan. How do they show which way the roof is slanting? Because you're looking from above. All you see are rectangles sometimes and squares, and you don't know which way the roof's going. Anybody?
Elevations?
No, on that plan, on the floor, on the roof plan, so it's looking down.
Uh-huh.
There's a way that they show which way slope down.
Oh, arrows with the arrows?
Yeah. On a roof plan, the arrow's always pointing down. So that's a good thing to remember. It's often obvious by the kind of roof, you know, and if you look at the elevation, you'll see the kind of roof, whether it's a, you know, hip roof or a gable roof. That one butterfly roof, a butterfly roof and a gable roof look exactly the same from the top, but the arrows would be pointing a different way. Usually it's intuitively obvious, but not always. So, especially if you have a really complicated roof. I lived in Boulder for a while in Colorado, and they're developing between Boulder and Denver like crazy. And they would, for some reason, Coloradans, the new developers, make these roofs that have 50,000 little areas on them, triangles. So you look down and it's just like this mosaic. I don't know why they go nuts with the roofs like that. It must be so hard to build, but it's really inefficient because it's only aesthetic. There's no real reason to make all those little planes. You'd need the arrows on those kind of plans. And why do we need a roof plan? I'm not going to answer that. That's a question. And then why do we need foundation plans? Duke, was that you?
Is
You
it
were
a
gonna answer
question
it,
or like?
You guys are well trained. When you hear a question, you want to answer it. That happened in your first 5 years of life. We're all well trained. When the voice goes up at the end, they want an answer. Okay, let me say a little bit about that. Because sometimes things are obvious to me because I've been doing this for 500 years, a little more than 500 years. And a lot of you guys are starting and sometimes I forget that. So I have to say, okay, Patrick. It's going to be multiple choice, why we need floor plans. And two of the choices are obvious. Three of the choices are obvious. One of them I'm going to explain because it's not as obvious. It says because foundations may not exactly follow floors on floor plans. So you can't just take a floor plan and assume the foundation is going to be exactly the same size underneath it. I mean, you're not going to know what the thickness of it is anyway, of the stem walls and various things. So that'll be on the, just look out for that one. And that's a true reason. Because it doesn't always follow the floor plan exactly. And then there are two other reasons that are obvious also. Okay. In California, we've talked about this. The two most common foundation types in Southern Cal. Do you all know those or do you want me to give them to you?
Shoot them.
Thickened slab, maybe?
What'd you say, John?
Thickened edge slab.
Yeah, slab's one. That's the easy one. The other one's got a million names. That's why it's not so easy, obvious. What if you don't put a floor on a slab, right? You don't put a floor joist and a floor system on top of slab, true?
True.
Actually, in remodel, you might do that.
Was it
Yeah,
a raised,
Huh?
Plate first,
like
right?
a raised foundation?
Yeah, raised foundation. That's probably the best name. Sometimes they call it a T foundation because it looks like an inverted T. Sometimes they call it an inverted T foundation. The top of the T or the bottom of the T is a footing and the side of the T is a stem wall. But I think they don't use those so much anymore. John, any of you framers know what the current lingo is?
I always just,
Raised foundation, maybe.
yeah, raised, because a lot of them are in T's or L's or, you know.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, so let's go with raised foundation. And that just means that it's raised off the ground and therefore it needs a floor system on top of it. Those are pretty much what we're stuck with here. Okay, on section, when you look at a floor plan and there's a symbol that's referring to a section, you know, it has that line, has a circle, and then it has a little arrow coming off the circle. You guys remember that?
Yes.
You go to a floor plan on your plans if you don't remember. So details don't have the arrows. Detail will have a circle, and that circle will have a line across it, and the upper one is the figure on that page and the bottom one's the page. So it may say on the bottom A6, so go to plan A6, and then on the top it'll say 4, which means figure 4 on that page. But the sections have an arrow as well. So what does that arrow mean?
The direction you're looking.
Yeah, the direction you're looking. You cut a section, and if you look one way, it's going to look different than if you look the other way.
Hey, Patrick, I had a question about the raised foundation and slab foundation.
Yes,
Those are the two main types, right?
in Southern Cal. I don't know.
With the raised one, is that like you just have piers and you got posts coming up and, or I mean, because
They usually have a perimeter foundation, which is often a footing and then a little stem wall
okay,
above it. John, there are variations of that, but that's kind of typical. And it will have piers in the middle if they don't, sometimes they'll just put a foundation wall across on the inside where a pier would go. But in Goleta, I've crawled under 1,000 houses and they all have piers. You know, the little concrete piers, they just sit, they're supposed to sit on a concrete pad, but sometimes they're just on the dirt. In the old days, they just put them right on the dirt. And they hold up the middle of the beams of that hold the joist, so, right.
So a raised foundation will have stem walls or piers or something versus a slab, which is they just put the plate right on top of the concrete.
Yes, so the easiest way to distinguish is that a slab doesn't have a floor system. The walls go right on the slab. The slab is the
Right,
floor.
right, right. Okay, I got
And a
you.
raised foundation, it'll have to have a, joist.
Got you.
I was trying to think of what other foundations there are. I restricted it to Southern Cal because I've lived here most of my life, but can anybody think of another kind of foundation besides those two?
I'm the only other one I can think of is in Green Building. We looked at permanent wood foundations, but that's kind of a,
Wood on gravel, right?
yeah.
Yeah, they got a name for that. That's what I was thinking of. That's the only one I can think of. Other one. What do they call? That's got another name, but it's basically treated wood on gravel with a drain there. And I was telling John, I don't know if in this class or previous class I've had with him, but when I was in Maine, I worked for a company, and one of the designers for the company designed a 2-story house with treated wood foundation. So he had there was actually a hole for a basement, and then he had 2 stories above that. And the basement, we just put gravel, and we put walls out of 2x6 treated wood and 2x6 plywood on that drain gravel. No, it couldn't have been a basement. It was just ground level because you need a drain. And it's a while back, so I'm having trouble remembering it. But he wanted to experiment. He was from College of the Atlantic, which are a bunch of great, creative, crazy people up in Bar Harbor. And they have an architecture school, and he wanted to try it, and he also wanted to build it before spring. And you can't build in the winter in Maine. So what we did is we went to a shop and we built all the walls before in a warm shop. And then as soon as it got, the ground got soft enough to dig a trench to put the gravel in, then we put the walls, then we started. So it was late spring and we didn't have to take the time to build a wall. So they did, and it's legal here and in Maine, all the way across. You can do that. The traditional Japanese foundation is that way. They had foundations like that forever. And I've talked to you about, I won't go into it because it'll take too long. But I love questioning foundations because, the Japanese and the Chinese have earthquake country too. Most of China and most of Japan are terribly earthquake ridden. And much worse than Southern California. And they've never built firm things because they realize that they need flexibility to ride out the shaking of the quake. So their architecture doesn't have thick, heavy foundations that could be, that are rigid, so they're just fighting nature. So they have, everything's more flexible, that kind of moves with the quakes. And I think it'd be worth us looking into that, but we got a lot of other fish to fry before that. We have to discover how to do nomadic architecture when the global warming makes all of us immigrate from one area to another. Hopefully you'll miss that in your lifetimes, but okay. So if I ask you why ceiling joists run in opposite directions, what are you gonna, from our discussion, what are you gonna tell me?
I didn't realize that. Wait, so ceiling joists, like, are you telling me that like on different floors that the joists run in different directions?
The ceiling, yeah, the ceiling joists often run, one room will have them one way and the other room will have them perpendicular. They won't all, the whole house won't be the same direction.
I didn't realize that. I
That's
don't know if we discussed that.
Yeah, so,
Money.
well, structural, we talked about, right? You don't want to, you want to span the least distance if you can,
Right.
because the wood will cost less. So that's one reason, keeping the cost down is a good reason. And then making sure when you have the spans fairly close to each other, you can use the same width wood, like 2x8s throughout. That makes the floor above, if you put everything on an 8-foot first floor, it makes the floor above the same level. But if you have a span that's got to be a 2x10 because you have such space that you need it, then you're an inch and a half, 2 inches higher than the rest of 2x8s. So you've got to bring that down somehow, or the others up. So to make the floor, second floor, and attics the same way. You could just say, well, it's an attic, who cares? We'll make all the joists different heights and they'll rise up into the attic at different degrees. But people use attics for storage, and they put HVAC equipment in there. So there's people going to use that. They don't want to trip over uneven floors. So even in an attic, you want a fairly flat floor. So those two reasons. So if I want to quickly understand the shape of a house, what two plans would I go to first?
Site plan or floor plan and shape. Site plan would work. Just the shape.
The site plan would be like a floor plan, only it would have less information. It wouldn't have internal walls. But the shape, the outside shape, you could get from either plan. You're right. But a floor plan's got a little more detail, a little closer view. But what about what other plan? Like you have a floor plan, you may not know what the roof looks like.
Elevations.
Yeah, elevation. Those are the two that kind of define the shape of the house. You know, a floor plan like we drew could be a rectangle with a line down the center signaling a gable roof. Remember that?
Yep.
But you don't know the slope of the gable roof. So on the elevation, you don't know if it's a real steep roof like in snow country or it's a flatter roof like here. So you need the elevation to point out things like, you know, the roof, the shape of the roof from the side. All right, I'll have some,
Sorry
I'll
to,
have,
sorry
yeah,
to interrupt. You said it was, for the last one, it was elevation and floor plan?
yes,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. I'm gonna have a subtraction and an addition problem, one of each, using feet and inches. So if you attended class, or you'll probably have notes for that. Is anybody really confused about that? You just have to remember, instead of tens, where when it gets to 10, you go to another place. Remember? In building, it's not a decimal system, it's a foot and inch system. So when you get to 12, that's a foot, you got to go to the foot place. It's 13 inches, you got 1 inch, and then 12 goes over to the foot. That's all you got to remember. If you know how to borrow and go from place to place, that's the trick of it. I'm going to ask you why detailed drawings are drawn at a larger scale. Don't answer that. It's pretty obvious, but. Okay, if a floor plan is missing a key dimension, here, you're building a house and you go, oh my God, I don't know what the distance is from here. The architect just left it out. What can you do to get that dimension?
I mean, you figure out what scale you're using first, right?
Yeah, and then what? Say it's a
And
quarter,
then-
you see it's a 1/4 inch scale.
I mean, you figure out what something is in relation to something else. Is that what you're talking about? Or
Well, no, but you can use that scale, right? You can use your scale
Yeah.
on the plan to find that dimension.
Right.
Yeah, if the architect doesn't have it, you just use your own scale. The other alternative is sometimes there'll be distances around it, dimensions around it, and you can add or subtract those to find the one that's missing. So both those are techniques for finding dimensions that aren't on the plan. So remember when we cited that house on the plan? Well, we didn't cite the house on plan. We looked at the plan and determined how we would cite it on the lot. Remember that exercise we did? I think
With the
John's done
arcing
it three
tapes?
or four times.
talking about when we arc the tapes, or is that
Pardon?
when we're using the arcing tape? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that was part of that example. So so the first thing we're looking for is one corner of the building, right? We have to find one corner from what the dimensions on the site plan give us. And we may have to do some, right angle 3, 4, 5 work or whatever. It may be given directly on the plan. Sometimes you have to interpolate, you have to figure it out from the information that's there. Right? And then what do you need after a point? You need the corner of the building. Then what do you need next? A dot tells you where that corner of the building is, but it doesn't tell you anything else. So what else do you need?
The direction that you're facing, like north, south, east, west. I mean, your orientation.
Yeah, but that a dot or a point doesn't have a direction. What has a direction? What's minimal for direction?
Dimension of the,
Yeah, a line, right? A line's going to be facing one dimension. A dot won't. So you need the wall. The wall is the thing that's facing. So you need, after the point, you need a wall, right? So you need 2 points. The wall is defined by 2 endpoints. So you've got one endpoint, your beginning, and that's dimensions from the boundary line on your plan, like we looked at. And then we have to find a second point to connect the dots for that first wall. And we do the same thing. We look for dimensions on the plan that can give us that second point. So I chose a plan for our exercise that was kind of not obvious, that made you kind of work more. Usually they're a little bit easier. If the house is in a city, it's usually parallel to the lot and parallel to the street. That's a piece of cake because one dimension will give you the whole spacing on all sides. But this one we chose was tilted on the lot. It was a country lot and it was tilted, so that makes it harder. So you get the first dot and then you get the second dot. Both of those are on the plans. Sometimes you have to work a little to get them. Then when you connect those, you've got your first wall. And since houses are mostly rectilinear, that's a word. If you want to impress people, that's a great word. It means rectangular in shape, rectilinear. Most houses are rectilinear in this country. There are round houses and things, but most of them are square or rectangular. If you have one wall, the rest fall right into place because you just do right angles and distance, right angle and distance, right angle and distance. And then you got the whole house. So that first wall, the first 2 points are strategic. Then the rest falls right into place with a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. Yeah. Now we did arcing on that exercise that you mentioned, Duke, because it wasn't obvious. They didn't put enough dimensions. The engineer, what's the guy that goes around and lays out the surveyor. The surveyor sometimes draws that site plan. And if the architect doesn't double check it and ask for more dimensions or fill them in, sometimes they're sketchy. So sometimes you'll have to use the arc method to interpolate to find what you need from what's there. You don't always have to do that, but it's critical to know how to do that sometimes.
I'm still not totally comfortable with that concept, to be honest. Like, you start from the corners of the.
With the arcing process?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just take a second. It won't take long because
I mean, I know you have a fixed point and then you're, moving your tape around it, but which
Oh,
2
wait,
points
I'm not-
do you begin with, I guess?
okay. Can you see, you can all see this, right?
Yes.
So here's your property.
That's the lot?
Yeah, it's a lot. This is the lot. And then the house starts here and goes up at an angle like that.
Right.
Okay. So they will often give you this dimension. And they'll often give you this. They should give you these two.
Okay.
And then that's easy to find that first corner. I mean, God, if they don't give anything to find one corner, it's a pretty poor plan. But this one here on the exercise we had didn't really give us exactly where that was at by dimension. So we had to do two things. It said, it gave us this place, I believe, but that's all. So we don't know how far this is from here or from here to finish that point, right? Can everybody see that?
Right. So we just know that it's certain dimension from the north end of the plot. Or,
Yeah, so we need some other way to get the distance from here to here or from here to here. They didn't give us this on the plan. So you could take, they did give you the length of the house, the width of the house. That was on the plan. So if we start here and do an arc of that width,
Okay.
we don't know we don't know what the angle is. So we have to just do an, fairly good sized arc to
Right.
catch any angle. And then when you come down from here with Z, wherever that hits that arc, that's the point there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So you could call it two arcs or just one arc and where the line hits
Okay.
that arc.
Yeah. Now it's clear.
Okay, great. So I always keep that plan because it's particularly poor. You have to work. Usually the site plans are much more okay. are much more complete. So it's like geometry. Basically, 2 points define a line segment. That's what you're doing. It's basically Euclidean geometry. You got 1 point, you can't do a line or a wall until you get a second point. So once you got 2 points and therefore one wall, you're off and running. The rest of the house, follows from that. Okay, now that's horizontally. That's the location of the house on the lot. But then the house is going to be on that lot height-wise. It's going to be above the ground, especially here. We don't have basements. But either way, the first floor, whether you have a basement or not, is going to be either, it depends on how the raised floor system is off the ground. There's various reasons for why it's raised. Usually in California, we want a crawl space so you can fix things under the house. You can go under there and make sure insulation and siding and stuff is okay. And so the house is raised up a bit. So when you're a builder and you're going in to site the house, you have to know how much above the ground. But you can't depend on ground because it may not be graded just right. So it's better to depend on elevations, and you get the elevations. The surveyor puts the elevation of the lot on the plan with a benchmark. Somewhere on the site plan, he will have a benchmark that gives the elevation above sea level. Everything works from there. So when you're building the house, you've got where it is on the lot. Now you need to know how high off the lot it is. So they're going to typically, site plan gives you the finished floor, occasionally the subfloor elevation of that first floor. And because they don't know how you're going to build a foundation, right? The surveyor doesn't know how you're going to build, what kind of foundations vary, right? Some people do it different ways. You may want more insulation, and so you have a bigger floor system, wider floor system. Surveyor doesn't know any of that. So he just puts the finished floor. Then you have to take and add up all the finished floor, subfloor, size of joist, mud sill the joist is on, footing, stem wall, footing. You're the one who decides all those dimensions. Well, the architect does. So what you're looking for in siting the house on the lot is you're looking for where the form boards that you're going to pour the concrete into. You want something concrete, no pun. You want something concrete to start with, and that's the foundation. So you don't care where the first floor is, except that it tells you where the top of the foundation is. So with a raised floor foundation, that we want the top of that form board. That's going to be the top of the stem wall. That's where the floor system will start. So you just add up all those dimensions from the finished floor to the foundation, top of the foundation. When you get that amount, you subtract that from the elevation of the first floor. If the elevation's 96 feet above sea level, and it'll say 96 feet, elevation 96 feet on that first floor. They have to make that on the site plan. And you have 4 feet worth of flooring and just flooring, maybe less, maybe 2 feet of flooring before you hit the foundation. Then you subtract the 2 feet from the 96 feet elevation, giving you 94 feet. That's where the top of your form boards are going to go.
Hey, Patrick.
Yes.
Say you're in the mountains and your elevation is 12,000 feet. Don't they use like a benchmark or something on the property? That
They in places really out of the way, and a lot of times people build them themselves and they don't get a surveyor to do the work because it's If they know their property boundaries, that's all they care about. I think they have GPS systems that can establish elevations without,
So they would
I mean,
still write like say we're up in like a mountain and somewhere 7,000 feet. They put that's the number they'd write down.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, you don't want to work with those numbers.
Right.
So you would start that benchmark at 10,000 feet. You could call that 0.
0. Oh, okay. Okay.
And then if the finished floor was 10,020 feet, say the benchmark was 10,000, on the plan, it said 10,020 feet for the floors, if an architect designed it, then you'd know it was 20 feet above. So you could just start with 0 and go to 20 feet, forget about the 1,000. As long as you keep the same distance, it doesn't matter what,
Got it.
Okay, great questions, you guys. So benchmarks come from, they're a number, so many feet, and that number is the feet above sea level. Elevations in building are given in feet above sea level. So if it says 60 feet, it's 60 feet above sea level. I don't know what they do with the global warming and the fact that the sea level is going to be changing. We'll have to figure that out. I tried to find out the history of that because I was kind of fascinated, because we have tides, right?
Yeah,
So-
I always wondered that myself. Like,
So
how-
sea level varies from
like an
time of
average,
day.
like must be like an average number or something, right?
Yeah, and then you have seasonal tides too. So yeah, it's some kind of average, but
And it's liquid and it's fluid. So it's
I know. But if you call up engineers or surveyors, they don't know any of that because they just plug in the numbers. They were taught how to do that. They don't care. You go, hey, but why do you do that? Oh, wait, look, it's in the book. We just follow the tables. Don't worry about it. One time I called up a bunch of surveyors to find this out. Oh man, I spent hours going nowhere with these guys. So I try to have that information because it's kind of interesting, but sometimes you just can't find it. So when you have the first line, the first wall on a site plan, or on the land rather, then you're going to do right angles because usually the walls are square to each other. And so what are you going to use for that to find the right angles?
3, 4, 5.
Yeah. And right angles are also called perpendicular, right? So that's part of the vocabulary. Most of you probably know this, but if you don't, perpendicular and 90 degrees and right angles all have the same meaning. So site plans show the where to place the house horizontally on the lot, where to place the house vertically in its place, and any kind of grading issues. How the site plans will also show grading. So if it's a hill and there's a lot of grading, then you may have a set of separate continuing plans that show the grading. Why is a monolithic slab? So sometimes they call this thickened slab that the word John used. Carpenters say thickened because they can't say monolithic. Just kidding. But monolithic they use in the textbooks. Our textbook uses it. So mono means one, right? Monotone, one color. Monotonous, too much of one thing. Monolithic. What does lithic mean? Anybody? Stone.
Stone?
Yeah. So we have a thing called Paleolithic, which means early Stone Age. Stone Age is lithic, Neolithic, late Stone Age, New Stone Age. So lithic is Stone Age. Anybody ever heard of a lithograph? It's like a printing technique, and they etch stones. So lith means stone. So monolith means one piece. They're calling concrete a stone. One pour. So it's called monolithic or thickened slab. Why is it thickened on the edge?
It's the footing.
For the
Hey,
load?
watch out! I'm done with my coffee, you guys.
Just
Because
for
of
the
what,
load?
John?
Oh.
I think Marcus was saying something.
Oh, I just said, is it for the load?
Yeah, it's for the load, because you've got the big loads on the walls, right? There's no load in the middle of a building except a live load, people in there. But the walls bear the roof and the stories above, and they bear all the weight. So so concrete that holds it up has to be thick enough to strong enough to bear that. So a little 6-foot slab wouldn't do it. It would just chip off the edge of the slab. The weight would just fracture the slab. So they gradually bend it down. I think we've got pictures of that in one of your handouts somewhere. In California, hey, how come I'm echoing? You guys don't hear that?
It stopped.
Okay, it stopped, yeah. Okay, sometimes I have no control. So these T foundations, the T foundation, some places they pour them separate. They pour the footing first. And one of the reasons they do that is, two reasons. Sometimes basements back east and the north use block wall, and they'll pour the footing first, and then they'll put rebar in it, and they'll put block wall above that. So that's one reason. The other reason is, to pour it, usually, to separate it. The other reason is sometimes they'll put insulation between them, like styrofoam. And you'll see that in some of the pictures and books. Let's see. No, I'm wrong. The styrofoams in the inside when they're pouring a floor, a concrete floor. Now, like on a slab, sometimes they'll pour the slab and the footing as one, but that doesn't. Sometimes they'll pour them as two and put a piece of concrete between the slab and the footing. I'll show you. It's not relevant for the question, but I'll show you a picture when I'll find one and show you. But they pour in California. We pour that raised foundation or the upside down T. We pour it as one. We don't pour the footing and then the stem wall. Yeah, I don't know. Probably nobody's seen it ever poured separately. If you do it once, it saves all that time. Otherwise, you have to wait for the first one to dry, and then it'll really slow your thing. So we do it all as one pour. Footing. The footing's the bigger piece, wider piece on the bottom of a stem wall. And I'm going to ask you why we have a footing. Why we have that wide footing, okay? Okay, there's a thing called building lines. We've used that before, but you may have forgotten. And typically those are the outside of the floor system. So what else are they the outside of? If they're the outside of a floor system, of your joist system, what else are they the outside of?
They could be the outside of the foundation.
Yeah, unless we have a brick veneer, which we don't have very much. There are a few cases where the foundation and the floor system are staggered, but in Southern Cal, mostly they line up. And what else lines up with that? What's immediately above and flush with the floor system? Anybody?
A wall?
Walls.
Oh.
So, but usually in California, it's the frame of the wall. The walls have stuff on them, right? They have sheathing and then they have siding of some kind.
Oh, yeah.
In Southern Cal, it's most typical to have the framing of the wall, just the studs, even with the outside of the floor joist. And then the sheathing will go outside and sometimes go down, cover the foundation a little, and the siding will do the same. There's variations, but that's pretty typical. So building line. So if it's the outside of the foundation and the floor system and the wall, you're going to build your foundation. The outside of the foundation, you've got a foundation wall. The outside of it, when you pour a stem wall in a raised foundation, the upside down T, you have form boards, right? You pour the concrete into something. You pour it into a channel between two boards. So if the concrete slaps up against the inside of the outside board, what's that interface there? The concrete stem wall fills up between the two form boards, and the outside form board where the concrete comes against it. What's that line there?
The perimeter of the house?
Yes, the building line of the house. Because that's the edge of the foundation. It'll be the edge of the floor system. It'll be the edge of the wall. So the reason I'm telling you that is because when you go to set your foundation boards, you set the outside foundation, the inside of the outside foundation board on the building line. So your foundation plan or your floor plan will have the dimensions of those building lines. It'll be the total width or length of your house. And that's where that line will be the interface between where the concrete slaps up against the outside form board. Should I draw it? Or do you all get it?
Honestly, I'm trying to picture. I do concrete. I'm trying to picture how we do that T.
That's cool. Okay. I may be wrong. Let's check it out.
We do pour just like to make it that T shape. Like
Yeah.
we'll pour that bottom piece first and let it dry, and then have our rebar sticking up out of it or whatever.
Yeah, I got you. But in terms of the so this is looking down at a corner of the house with form boards. These are 2x12s that are gonna hold the concrete. You're gonna pour the concrete in here. So the line I'm talking about, this is the outside frame board, right? This is the outside form board. This is the inside edge of it. That line there, the red line is a built, can you see that? No. Why don't you guys say something?
See, I mean, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, these are form boards, inner form boards, outer form boards. You're pouring concrete into that. The outside board, where the concrete hits the board, that's the building line. Because that's the edge of the foundation, and you're gonna have the floor joist above it. That system's gonna come right there also. and the walls above that.
Hey,
That- That makes
Test.
it clear, right?
It's 7:35. Could we get a break?
Uh,
Or are we almost done?
we've got 8 more. You want to go for it?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So building lines are usually at the outside edge of floor system or concrete foundation. True or false? Okay. What does CMU stand for? I don't know that we discussed this, but cinder block foundations, sometimes the blocks are called cement masonry unit. And the reason I want you to know that is because sometimes on the plans, that's the only thing they call them. So you won't know they're cinder blocks unless you're familiar with this. CMU, cement masonry unit. What is an LVL?
Laminated veneer lumber.
Laminated veneer lumber, a piece of engineered lumber. Good. What is engineered lumber as opposed to regular lumber? Oh, you're not. I'll give you this one. It's lumber that's made in a factory from parts of wood. Because even though you know what it is, it might be hard to say that. Right? You know those joists, the I joist and the LVLs and all that, obviously they're made in a factory. You have to have glue and pressure. Okay. And what is lumber? Everybody's got their thing off.
My bad.
Hey, I promise we only got a few more minutes, so hang in there. What's regular lumber?
Soft
Natural.
wood, conventional lumber.
Wood
Natural.
material.
Cut off of a tree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's building material made from the tree itself. No additions. It's everybody knows what lumber is, but I'm trying to get you guys to articulate these things. 2x4s actually measure what width and what thickness. You've got a chart somewhere in one of your handouts that has that.
By 3.5.
Yeah. What does a hold down do? So I'm going to tell you what it. I'm gonna
Anchors
wait. Don't answer it. I
Oh,
want to tell you if you don't have a hold down, you've only got the bottom plate of a wall bolted to the foundation, which means the earthquake can pull the studs right out of the plate. So a hold down prevents that. So tell me how it does that.
It connects a stud or other
Wait.
vertical.
Okay. That was a rhetorical question or a non-question. Okay. 3 left. Can you turn in home drawn plans to the building department?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm gonna mute
Yes,
myself.
you can.
That's
They should be legible and informative. If they're not, they'll let you know. But you don't have to draft, you don't have to use a drafting board, you know. Why do building inspectors have to do inspections all along the way of the building's construction? Ah, that's a great question. If I say so myself.
make sure it's all up to code, right?
Yeah, but why do they do it? Why do they have separate ones along the way, not just one at the end?
Because you cover parts of it up.
Because you cover stuff up, exactly. I know that's obvious, but I want you to say it.
Tracy,
And last question, in California, 65% of the waste from remodel, demolition, or new construction must be recycled or reused. True or false? Don't say it.
True.
That's a lot of recycling.
Okay, so I'm done. Does anybody want to stay and talk a little bit about drafting? 15 minutes. You won't hurt my feelings if you say no. If you were one of the people that wanted help, we'll do it another time. Looks like, see, I see your faces and they're all tired, especially Alec. He's going to fall asleep any second. So, and the ones who don't have their face, I have no idea what they're doing, and I don't even want to know. But yeah, it's been a lot. I mean, you just learn half the course in a few hours. But see how it reinforces what you've learned. And in some cases, you may have missed the original information. So, any questions about the test? John, do I need to tell them anything? This is the first quiz for some of these guys. Most of you, I think, have taken quizzes.
Dividing by e to the minus 2x, we just get u double prime minus 4u prime equals 0.
Which question is this, Patrick?
This is math.
So,
Just make sure once you open the test, you don't close it.
yeah.
If
Yeah,
we said w
I put a,
u prime, then we have the first row equation of w prime minus
hello.
4u
We're talking,
0.
what do you call it when you do two things? Multitasking here. Doing the math class and the construction class in one evening. So does everybody feel like they know where to get information and about the test?
I was going to ask you about that last question. I know you covered that when you were talking about your own project. So should I just rewatch the Zoom or was that
No,
something in your material?
No, it's true.
Okay.
Don't watch a whole Zoom for that one question.
I was going to say.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. I just want you to know it. So whether I tell you or, if you get it wrong, if you get any of these wrong on a test, we're going to go over it and then you'll get it right a third time. So that should probably do it for all of us to get some of this stuff. So, it's funny. If anybody, Rodney or Jim gave this test, it'd be totally different. There is so much information in building and, everybody's got their quirks. You probably know what mine are by now. But one thing I do is I try to get you guys to articulate things that you know intuitively. Because the better you learn how to talk about construction, the more useful you'll be, to partners and to your bosses on jobs.
That vocabulary is huge, man. Seriously.
Yeah, vocabulary is huge, exactly. And sometimes things are really obvious and it's really like this right here, it's obvious, but it's, if you hear me talk about the inside of the outside board, what the hell is that guy talking about? So hopefully we're getting trained to, think that way and talk that way about these things. So I think you're all doing pretty good that way. So I hope I recorded that. Did I? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions about the exam, not about answers, but just about if you're confused about how to do it, you can email me. And if next Tuesday, something happens in your Canvas or something, you just can't do it, just email me then. I'll be here. And you can email me. I may even just open up the Zoom if you want to talk. I could do that too. Just have the Zoom going. And then you can ask me questions. Yeah, let's do that instead of an email. I'll just do work here while I'm waiting for you guys if you have questions. But The only other thing I'll
Sorry,
say,
can I interrupt you quickly, Patrick? This
Absolutely.
is Lindsay. I just want to clarify. So next week on Tuesday, are we not coming to class on the Zoom? It's just taking the test?
yeah, thanks for asking that. I always forget to say that. Yeah, you don't need to come to class. Just go right to the Canvas shell and it's under quiz. You'll see it. John, is that right? You think I'd know this by now. But yeah, you just go and I think it'll be, just keep looking. If you go under quiz, you'll get it, but it'll also be in the margin in those places. I forget what that's called, but you'll find it. And if you can't find it, I'll be on Zoom. You don't have to come to Zoom, but I'll be here and you can come to Zoom and ask, hey, how do I get on if you're stuck? Okay. And I'll check my email every 15 minutes too, just to make sure you're not trying to get a hold of me that way. You'll have the whole period 6. I'll actually open it up. Should I open it up early, John? Is that easy for you?
Yes, please.
I'll open up at 5. For some of you don't get off work and you won't be able to come till 6. I'll have the test, I have to set a time for it. I'll have it start at 5 and end at 10. That gives you 5 hours. You'll be asleep before you take that long to do it. That should
I
be
need
plenty
another
of
hour,
time.
Patrick.
Huh?
I'm gonna need another hour.
Yeah. So that's plenty of time. And if that's not enough time, email me and tell me and I'll give you more time because we got to do this. So hopefully you'll be done by 9 so I can go to bed. But I'm your teacher, so I have to sacrifice. So if you need the time, you won't though. I mean, you've got practically all the answers. So you should probably zip through it. And sometimes you'll forget and the wording will screw you up. Just get a hold of me and I'll explain it to you. That happens, right? Okay, we won't do any drawing today. I'll wait till another time when we're more rested and we may follow up on a few things on that because some of you wanted that. And we'll do the same thing. We'll have an optional thing at the end of a coming class. We've got a bunch of classes left. God. Okay.
Hey,
If there are no,
does anyone know why Canvas was down this morning and last night?
yeah, I think there was a electrical shortage, a blackout at main campus.
Yeah,
When I
it
got
said
on
power
tonight,
outage.
power outage. When I got on tonight, there's a little green symbol that said campus has been on a power outage, and it was letting me into Canvas and Zoom, but I thought, oh my God, what if that had happened late? We'd have to postpone our prep. That wouldn't be the end of the world. Okay, everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Everybody feel confident about the test? Like I say, you're not going to get worse than a C, so don't worry at all. And most of you will get A's and B's. And the people who just have trouble taking tests, that's just something that's just part of the reality, but hopefully that won't affect you enough to get a bad grade. You get C's or up. And I will see you, I won't see you unless you ask me, but I'll have the test ready for you next Tuesday. All right. Okay, good night, everybody.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you,
See you.
Thank you.
Have a good
All
night.
right.
All right.
Good night.
All right. See you next time.
See you.